Thank you for watching Amishakil 5858. I am Amir Putnam. I am thankful to all news resources and my entire team. Following news have been reported by American, European, Asian, African, Australian and Canadian channels and also by news agencies, Reuters, AFP, AP. Now the headlines. New peace proposal before Hamas. Arrest warrant for Israeli leaders can be issued by international court. U.S. accused 5 units of Israeli army who have violated human rights. Pro-Palestinian protests are continued across the U.S. in campuses of colleges. So far, hundreds of arrests have been made by police. India under investigation by U.S. authorities for assassination attempt. U.S. Secretary Anthony Blinken is still in Middle East. Israeli bombing killed 12 people yesterday in southern Gaza. Ukraine need arms urgently. Yesterday, Ukraine pulled back from 4 villages under heavy Russian fire. More than 40 people died by flood in Kenya. Southern Asia under extreme heat. Tornadoes hit Oklahoma. Lab test under scrutiny by FDA in America. Taylor Swift made new records. On Wall Street, Dow Jones Industrial, S&P 500 and Nasdaq all went up. Now the news in detail.
Good evening, I'm Amna Nawaz.
And I'm Jeff Bennett. On the NewsHour tonight, Hamas considers the latest ceasefire proposal as Israeli leaders brace for potential International Criminal Court arrest warrants.
With protests against the war in Gaza spreading to more college campuses, we take a look at student demands for divestment from Israel.
And the Indian government is accused of attempting to assassinate Sikh activists on U.S. soil.
This was something that sort of traces back to the 1980s. It sort of went quiet for many decades since then, but has flared back up since Modi came to power.
Welcome to the NewsHour. A Hamas delegation left Cairo this evening and is expected to return with a response to the latest ceasefire proposal. That's as fraught negotiations continue nearly 7 months into the war in Gaza.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken is back in the region today, and he pressed not just for a ceasefire and for hostage release, but for much more humanitarian aid into Gaza. In the meantime, the Israeli bombardment continues in Gaza's south, with the city of Rafah in their sights. Homes in southern Gaza today, nothing more than crushed concrete and twisted bodies. Amid this wreckage, one small... But just miles away in Rafah, the war rages on. The State Department announced today that 5 units of the Israeli military were found to have violated human rights in incidents before the current war and not in Gaza. The U.S. says those violations are being addressed and will not affect U.S. weapon sales to Israel.
In the day's other news, Ukraine appealed for quick delivery of Western weapons as it gave more ground in the east. The army chief said Sunday that Ukrainian troops pulled back from 3 villages lacking air defenses under heavy Russian fire. In Kyiv, President Volodymyr Zelensky met with NATO head Jens Stoltenberg and warned that a new U.S. aid package and other weapons can't come soon enough.
The Russian army is now trying to take advantage of a situation where we are waiting for supplies from our partners, especially from the United States, and that is exactly why the speed of deliveries means stabilizing the front. Russia's army is preparing for further offensive actions.
For his part, NATO's Stoltenberg criticized alliance members for not delivering what they promised to Ukraine. In western Kenya, at least 45 people died in flash floods early today after torrential rain across the region. More than 100 people were injured and scores more were missing. Floodwaters in the Great Rift Valley region coated the area in mud, wiping out homes and uprooting trees. Heavy rain has inundated the area since mid-March. Weeks of record heat are hitting new extremes across southern Asia. Temperatures have soared to nearly 119 degrees in Myanmar and 111 in Thailand. And Cambodia has had its hottest weather in 170 years. Today in the Philippines, authorities canceled in-person classes for millions of public school students, and rickshaw operators in Bangladesh braved the sweltering temperatures, taking breaks to rest between jobs.
I have never experienced such heat in my life. Yes, it should be hot, but there would usually be gusts of wind and rain. But it's not happening this time. People are suffering a lot.
In neighboring India, officials are predicting more heat wave days than normal until June, when the monsoon season sets in. In Oklahoma, an extensive cleanup is underway after weekend tornadoes killed 4 people and injured at least 100. The storms spread destruction across the small town of Sulphur south of Oklahoma City. Entire commercial blocks crumbled and homes were blasted into piles of bricks and wooden beams. A federal trial started today in Hawaii over the leak of jet fuel into Pearl Harbor's groundwater. The contamination came from an underground U.S. military fuel tank and put thousands of people at risk. 3 lawsuits by military families argue Navy officials knew the water was tainted but told people it was safe. The government disputes whether it really caused health problems. The FDA will start regulating new medical tests developed by labs to see if they actually work. The final rule announced today applies to tests for everything from cancer to COVID-19. It does not include existing test products. Agency officials say the rule is designed to, quote, ensure that important healthcare decisions are made based on test results that patients and healthcare providers can trust. And on Wall Street, stocks edged higher to start the week. The Dow Jones Industrial Average gained 146 points to close at 38,386. The Nasdaq rose 55 points. The S&P 500 added 16. And there is a new record in music. Taylor Swift is now the first artist to occupy all 14 top spots of the Billboard Hot 100 at the same time. They're all tracks from her new album, The Tortured Poets Department. Swift also set the previous record 2 years ago when she occupied the top 10 spots. Still to come on the NewsHour, Tamara Keith and Amy Walter break down the latest political headlines. Author David Sanger discusses his new book on America's new Cold Wars with China and Russia. And we take an inside look at NPR's long-running Tiny Desk concert series with its new host.
This is the PBS NewsHour from WETA Studios in Washington, journalism at Arizona State University.
Pro-Palestinian protests showed no signs of letting up today across many college and university campuses. If anything, encampments and protests have actually been growing. Universities handled their respective situations differently, but several schools are drawing a tougher line. Columbia University said it started suspending some students who stayed in encampments after a deadline. State troopers were called in at the University of Texas at Austin, and nearly 300 people were arrested at other schools over the weekend. Tensions again at a boiling point today, with state troopers arresting students.
Endowment investment decisions without the endowment taking a hit.
Charlie Eaton, assistant professor of sociology at the University of California, Merced. Thanks for your time and for your insights. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
India has increasingly seen its stature grow on the world stage. Led by populist Hindu Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the world's biggest democracy has grown its economy and its geopolitical influence. But an investigation by the Washington Post adds new evidence to allegations that India is also trying to murder some of its critics, even on American soil. William Brangham has more.
According to the Post, on the eve of Modi's first state visit to America, members
100 miles away in New York City.
Greg Miller of the Washington Post, really tremendous piece of reporting. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
As protests of the war in Gaza spread to more college campuses across the country, the impact on the 2024 presidential race could be growing too. Just one of the stories to discuss with our Politics Monday team. That is Amy Walter of the Cook Political Report with Amy Walter and Tamara Keith of NPR. Great to see you both. And let's begin with those protests. Obviously, we've been seeing them spread across college campuses unless you're a former president and happen to be in criminal court. Amy Walter, Tamara Keith, always good to see you both. Thank you so much. You're welcome.
On Christmas Day 1991, the Soviet Union ceased to exist, and with it, the Cold War. At the same time, China was amid its rapid expansion and opening to the world. Now, times have changed. Russia is again a principal American adversary, now joined by a much stronger competitor, China. The challenge presented by both nations and the missteps made by U.S. presidents in dealing with both along the way is the subject of a new book. Here's Nick Schifrin.
After the end of the Cold War, successive presidents and administrations then this view of a globalized, borderless world that we had a bit of a pipe dream 30 years ago.
The book is The New Cold Wars, China's Rise, Russia's Invasion, and America's Struggle to Defend the West. David Sanger of the New York Times, thank you very much as always.
Thank you, Nick.
It's a tiny desk that's become a huge draw for some of the world's most famous musicians. I worked at NPR many years ago and recently returned to talk to the new host of the long-running concert series about why this unique format continues to resonate with so many. It's part of our arts and culture series, Canvas. So this is the tiny desk.
This is the tiny desk, and it's a tiny desk, it's a tiny space, it's a tiny everything.
Bobby Carter's new job is a big one, overseeing NPR's Tiny Desk concerts, launched in
Taking a shot at this shit.
Bobby Carter, congratulations on your new role and continued success with Tiny Desk.
It's good to see you back here, Jim.
It's good to be back.
Yes, sir.
The words Cartier and bargain are almost never said in the same breath, but the legendary French jeweler has been forced to extend an enormous discount to one man after he claimed an error allowed him to buy 2 pairs of earrings for just $28 that were supposed to sell for nearly $28,000. Ellie Pitt of Independent Television News has more.
Designer jewellery doesn't come cheap. Unless, of course, you find it online for much. Cartier haven't commented, but the earrings finally arrived at a discount of around £29,500, and Rogelio was more than happy to show them off.
Okay.
And that was Layla Hayes reporting from Independent Television News.
Talk about a discount. Right? All right, online right now. Spring is about to become very noisy for many people across the country. Up to a trillion cicadas are expected to emerge in parts of the Midwest and South. That's on our Instagram page right now.
And join us again back here tomorrow night when we talk to college student journalists about the protests against the war in Gaza on their campuses. And that is the NewsHour for tonight. I'm Amna Nabaz.
And I'm Jeff Bennett. For all of us here at the PBS NewsHour, thanks for joining us, and have a great evening.
This is Asia First.
Good Tuesday morning, I'm Julie Yu. It's 9 a.m. here in Singapore. The headlines this hour, calling on Hamas to accept Israel's ceasefire deal.
Hamas has before it a proposal that is extraordinarily generous.
All the eyes of the world should be on them today, saying take that deal. It will bring about this stop in the fighting that we all want to see so badly.
A 40-day ceasefire is reportedly on the table, along with accepting 33 hostages in exchange for Palestinians held in prisons. Observers see Israel's offer as a major compromise, as the Netanyahu government faces immense domestic pressure over the fate of the captives, coupled with international criticism over the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Pro-Palestinian protests swell at U.S. college campuses. Hundreds of state troopers in riot gear move in on students at the University of Texas, Austin, while in New York, Columbia begins suspensions as activists defy a deadline to vacate encampments.
I'm Arnold Gay. Chinese President Xi Jinping heading to Europe. It's his first trip to the continent in 5 years, and he'll be making state visits to France, Serbia, and Hungary from Sunday. Beijing's peace efforts in the Russia-Ukraine war will be in focus, along with trade tensions as the bloc investigates alleged Chinese subsidies. Plus, top UN officials warn this year's El Niño weather conditions are likely to be one of the worst on record. 40 million people in 16 countries said to be affected.
I'm Elizabeth Neo with your business news. Cashing in on the AI boom, South Korean tech giant Samsung Electronics reported a big jump in first quarter operating profit as memory chip sales nearly double. And suspected government intervention. The Japanese yen strengthens against the US dollar as authorities try to shore up the currency after it fell to a 3-decade low at first.
Top diplomats from the US and UK have urged Hamas to accept a proposed ceasefire deal as concerns go over Israel's planned ground invasion of Gaza's southern city of Rafah.
Egyptian and Qatari mediators are meeting in Cairo for talks on a truce in the besieged enclave. And the latest ceasefire and hostage release proposal appears to include a major compromise from Israel. Israel is now reportedly willing to accept the release of just 33 hostages, having previously demanded for at least 40 to be freed in any deal. Israel's latest proposal comes as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu faces mounting domestic pressure to secure the release of the remaining hostages.
US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, who is on his 7th trip to the Middle East since the war broke out, said he's hopeful Hamas will make the right decision and accept Israel's proposal. The UK's Foreign Secretary David Cameron also called for the militant group's leaders to take the deal, saying that the Gaza conflict will not end until all Israeli hostages are released. The official spoke at a World Economic Forum meeting in Riyadh.
Hamas has before it a proposal that is extraordinarily generous on the part of Israel. And in this moment, the only thing standing between the people of Gaza and a ceasefire is Hamas. They have to decide, and they have to decide quickly.
I hope Hamas do take this deal, and frankly all the pressure in the world and all the eyes of the world should be on them today, saying take that deal. It will bring about this stop in the fighting that we all want to see so badly.
Egyptian media say the Hamas delegation that took part in the latest round of truce talks in Cairo have left the country. The group will reportedly return with a written response to the ceasefire proposal. Sarah Coates with more details on the deal.
We did hear a spokesperson from Hamas a little earlier coming out to say that there are no major issues with this latest proposal, adding that the atmosphere is positive unless there are new Israeli obstacles. Now, we do understand, according to a number of reports, that Israel, as you mentioned, would be willing to accept 33 hostages rather than 40 from the humanitarian category. This is women, children, men over the age of 50, and also the sick and wounded. Also a number of concessions when it comes to operations in the Strip, like the IDF clearing out a corridor that actually divides the Gaza Strip between the north and the south, and also allowing people to return to their homes back in the northern part of the Strip, including men of fighting age, which was a major sticking point in discussions before. Now, it is important to point out that this main sticking point, of course, the end to the war, is still there. We've heard numerous reports coming from Hamas officials saying that they will take nothing less than a complete, comprehensive ceasefire. But there are reports in Axios circulating that Israel is willing to discuss the restoration of calm in Gaza, and this would be the first time that we've really heard, if indeed these reports are correct, that we have indeed heard from Israeli officials as deliberating rather, an end to the war in the Strip. So certainly all eyes on Cairo. The feeling here in Israel is one of hope, and a number of families of these hostages have now come out rallying today, saying that this deal is the most important thing and far more important than any military operation.
Well, Columbia University in New York says it's starting to suspend student protesters who have refused to abide by a deadline to vacate the pro-Palestinian encampment on campus. And the student protesters have vowed to stay put until the school meets these 3 demands: divest from assets that support Israel's military, transparency in the school's finances, and amnesty for students and faculty who were disciplined for taking part in the demonstration.
We will not be moved by these intimidation tactics. You can see outside you now that the students are mobilized. There's hundreds of them here today. They will not be moved. We demand divestment. We will not be moved unless by force.
Rather than scaring off the students, we come back stronger and more strong together than we ever had before.
Reports say demonstrators have been arrested on more than 20 campuses across at least 16 states. And the White House has said that citizens have a right to protest, and it's up to schools to have the police on site.
As far as police presence, that's up to the colleges and universities. That's for them to decide. And we have to be able to allow Americans to peacefully protest within the law. And we understand this is a difficult time, and we're going to call out any type of hateful rhetoric.
The demonstration at Columbia University has sparked a string of protests across the country. Over in Austin, Texas, videos on social media show the police approaching a pro-Palestinian encampment at the University of Texas. The Associated Press says more than 900 protesters have been arrested throughout the country. Tony Waterman reports.
It took police only about 4 hours to completely clear the tent encampment that had cropped up here on the lawn on the UT Austin campus on Monday. There had been a couple dozen demonstrators that had set up those tents. They then were locked arm in arm around them, protecting them. And within about 30 minutes, state troopers were called in. They encircled those protesters and started arresting them one by one. There have been at least 40 arrests that have taken place. And of course, this comes less than a week after 57 individuals were arrested here during the initial start of these demonstrations. You can see that the lawn has now been completely cleaned up. And there are a couple dozen students and demonstrators that have retaken over the lawn. But in between that happening, there was a very dramatic confrontation between police and demonstrators that took part on another part of campus. The demonstrators had gone to the police vans that were holding those individuals that had been arrested. Demonstrators were pepper sprayed. There were 2 large bangs that went off, reportedly sound grenades that went off to disperse the crowd. After the pepper spraying happened, we saw police start to retreat to a different part of campus. The protesters followed them, and at this point, there doesn't seem to be a huge police presence, at least where we're standing here. The university did release a statement earlier in the day saying that they have received a number of online threats that have now been reported to the local and state police, and also said that large stones were found, quote, strategically placed inside that encampment earlier today, although we cannot independently verify that had happened. Earlier in the day, we saw dozens of faculty members that were engaged in a silent protest. More than 500 of them sent a letter to the president of UT this morning, on Monday morning, saying that they have lost confidence in his leadership. It's unclear at this point if there's going to be a vote of no confidence in the coming days and weeks, but things starting to calm down a little bit. You can see the chanting picking up once again. Tony Waterman, CNA, Austin, Texas.
The Chinese President Xi Jinping will visit Europe for the first time in 5 years amid growing tensions over a range of issues.
Among them, Beijing's support for Russia's military, alleged Chinese espionage, and trade tensions. The EU last month launched an investigation into China's public procurement of medical devices amid concerns the country unfairly favors domestic suppliers. Chinese subsidies to electric car manufacturers is also being probed. Plus, fashion retailer Shein is on the radar for allegedly selling counterfeit products on its platform. Proceedings have also been opened against TikTok over data privacy concerns for minors.
Beijing has asked the EU to, quote, stop wantonly going after and restraining Chinese companies under various pretexts. It has repeatedly characterized the West's concerns about Chinese excess capacity in some sectors as baseless hype.
President Xi's first stop is France, where his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron is expected to raise the issue of Chinese firms allegedly funneling sanctioned EU-made goods to the Russian military. The conflict in the Middle East, climate change, and human rights issues are also expected to come up.
中方期待同法方一道，以此访为契机，秉持优良传统，积极面向未来，进一步巩固政治互信，加强团结合作，推动中法全面战略伙伴关系迈上新台阶，为中欧关系健康稳定发展注入新动力，为促进世界和平稳定和发展进步做出新贡献。
The presidency would also make state visits to Serbia and Hungary. China sees Hungary as an important partner in promoting its ambitious Belt and Road Initiative, while the trip to Serbia coincides with the 25th anniversary of the deadly U.S. bombing of the Chinese embassy in Belgrade.
Well, tensions once again flaring between India and Canada. New Delhi has summoned the Canadian Deputy High Commissioner after separatist slogans were raised during a public event in Toronto. The incident happened when the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was addressing a crowd to mark Khalsa Day, also known as the Sikh New Year. Several spectators shouted pro-Khalistan slogans that alluded to a controversial movement to establish a Sikh homeland within India. India's foreign ministry says it's launched a strong protest to Ottawa, conveying deep concern over the display. It said the incident not only impacted India-Canada relations, but also encouraged a climate of violence in Canada, which is detrimental to the country's citizens. Relations between both countries turned frosty after Mr. Trudeau alleged the link between the Indian government and the killing of a pro-Khalistan leader Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Canada last year. New Delhi has denied the allegations, calling them absurd and baseless. The country also temporarily suspended visa services to Canada. And we will turn to business news next with Liz Nyo, suspected intervention giving the Japanese yen a bit of a boost.
Arnold, but no official confirmation yet. But the Japanese currency went on a wild ride after falling to 160 per dollar. And I'll run through the current state of play this morning. Plus, we will unpack the latest earnings from Samsung Electronics as the world's largest memory chip maker meets expectations on the back of AI optimism.
A hyper-competitive job market.
Today, a teenage girl charged with the stabbing murder of her 10-year-old sister in the New South Wales Hunter region.
It's very hard to imagine. It's unthinkable that this could happen to a 10-year-old.
More than statistics, new figures show almost half of the women murdered in Australia in the past year were killed by an intimate partner. Passengers stranded, budget airline Bonza cancels all flights as it considers its future viability. And home insurance premiums spike, and there are warnings that parts of Australia are at risk of becoming uninsurable. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Ross Childs. A 17-year-old girl has faced court charged with the murder of her 10-year-old sister at Lake Macquarie in New South Wales. Reporter Lillian Watkins has more from outside Broadmeadow Children's Court in Newcastle.
The 17-year-old has actually had her matter mentioned in court this morning at the Children's Court over the alleged murder of her 10-year-old sister. We know that the 17-year-old did not actually appear in court, but there was no application for bail, and she will next be expected to appear before court in June. What we know so far is that emergency services were called to a quiet suburb west of Newcastle in Burralee, where there was a 10-year-old girl found with multiple stab wounds. Paramedics tried to resuscitate her at the scene, but were unsuccessful, and she died. The 17-year-old was taken into custody at Belmont Police Station and held overnight and later charged with murder this morning.
What are police saying about what's happened, Lillian?
So given the nature of the ages of these two young people, police haven't been able to give a lot of detail. They have been able to confirm that the pair were sisters. They've said that the family had no involvement with police to this extent before, and they've said just the shocking scenes that, how horrendous it was for first responders to come into yesterday. We heard from Detective Squad Commander Daniel Doherty earlier about how tragic this is.
It's also a tragic incident. It's very hard to imagine. It's unthinkable that this could happen to a 10-year-old. There's a family at home who are still grieving, trying to come to terms with what happened to their 10-year-old family member and their loved one. So it's important to note the sensitivity around this, but our thoughts are with the family.
Lillian, how's the local community faring?
So naturally, the community is absolutely shocked. We spoke to some neighbours earlier this morning who said that they had no idea something was amiss until they heard the sirens. One man in particular said him and his wife were out on the porch having coffee when they saw a police motorbike buzz by, and it was quickly followed by half a dozen. They said that the sirens were the first thing to alert them because usually it was quite a quiet town, a very quiet community, and it sounds like this is something that neighbours and the local community are going to be having to come to terms with over the next days, months, and potentially years.
Lillian, thank you. Of the 75 women murdered in Australia in the last financial year, almost half were killed by a current or former partner, which is a 28% increase on the previous year. Reporter Jessica Rendell has the details from Sydney.
The report analyses data collected by the National Homicide Monitoring Program, which looks at homicide incidents and the demographics and scenarios surrounding victims and offenders. For this year's report, they looked at 232 incidents from June 2022 to 2023, and they found that there were 247 victims of homicide in that period, up 4% from the year before when there was 234 victims. They also identified 260 offenders during the 2022 to 23 period. 75 of the victims were women, and of those 75, 49 were killed by a male or former intimate partner. The report also noted that there was a 28% increase of intimate partner homicide involving a female victim from the previous year. Now, of course, this data does not include the deaths that we've seen since June last year when that reporting period ended. We know this year alone, 26 women have already died allegedly at the hands of men. That's 11 more women that have been killed by violence so far compared to last year. This has, of course, sparked mass rallies across the country with thousands marching for change. Calls of enough is enough echoed through cities and towns with heightened national interest and pressure on authorities to take action on this issue of violence against women perpetrated by men. Now, Dr. Rick Brown from the Australian Institute of Criminology spoke to News Breakfast earlier this morning about this research that they've been doing and some of the startling statistics that they found. Take a listen.
I think the most disturbing statistic that we have from our National Homicide Monitoring Program is that over the course of the time we've been running the program since 1989, there have actually been 1,667 women who have died at the hands of their partners through intimate partner homicide.
Now, it's unclear whether the increase in violence against women that we've seen from last year to this year is a trend. Researchers are still collecting that data, and no doubt this will go into their report next year, where they will also look at the causes and reasons behind this trend, if it is one. But this is, of course, all vital information that will inform lawmakers as they look to make much-needed change in this space, and change that people have been calling for.
A 54-year-old man has been charged with the murder of his mother. Police found the 78-year-old woman's body when officers were called to an address at Yangebup in Perth South. The man will face Fremantle Magistrates Court today. And if these stories have raised any issues for you, you can get help by calling the National Sexual Assault and Family Violence Counselling Helpline on 1800 RESPECT, which is 1800 737 732. We're taking you now to Brisbane, where the Queensland Premier is speaking after he unveiled a raft of law changes to further crack down on youth crime ahead of the state election later this year. This morning, Stephen Miles revealed the new laws, including expanding a trial of police stop and search powers to shopping centres, licensed premises, sporting and entertainment venues and high-risk retail outlets. We can bring you his comments now.
That I was Premier, I outlined a range of areas where I thought the government could and should do better, and one of those was community safety. And since then, I've been working with the relevant ministers to develop a community safety plan. Our focus has been on practical measures that have been proven to work. Things like more police, more visible policing, helicopters and other tools, equipment and resources for our police. Of course, we also have a new commissioner, and he's been able to stamp his authority on this plan as well. As you've heard, there is some evidence that these initiatives are working, some early evidence that these initiatives are working and that crime rates have turned a corner. And so we want to keep investing in those measures that have worked in this first quarter of the year. This is a plan that backs our police. 900 more police helicopters, more tools for police. It also expands the very successful Youth Justice Co-Responder model. It invests in the detention facilities that we need to ensure that when the courts determine that somebody needs to be detained for the safety of the community, that there is room and resources to detain them and to deliver the programs to them that they need. But more importantly, it invests in preventing crime before it occurs and intervening early before people become more serious offenders, repeat offenders. Having a single community safety plan is really important for government. So many agencies have a role to play in community safety, and this consolidated, comprehensive plan brings those efforts together and ensures everyone in government is pulling in the same direction, a direction designed to keep Queenslanders safe and to make sure that they feel safe in their homes and in their communities. I'll ask the Police Commissioner and the relevant ministers to say a few words, and then we'll hear from Brett from the Homicide Victims Support Group. It is one of several victim support organisations that have received additional funding in this plan so that they can do more of their important work right across the state, supporting people when crimes do occur. Commissioner?
Hello.
Can I start by just reinforcing that when I took over as the Commissioner, and as the Interim Commissioner, some of the things we did initially was to make sure that our organisation could do whatever was at its disposal using all the resources it had to keep our community safe, make it safer and make sure that our community felt safer. I also committed as a Commissioner to make sure that our workforce, my workforce, was properly supported and felt supported. So you saw with the work that we've been doing with operations Legion and Unison and Guardian, that we're proactively targeting those offenders, youth offenders and adult offenders that cause the most harm to our community. I felt, and my team felt, that we needed to get more proactive with the resources that we had at our disposal in getting to those areas where crime was really hurting our community based on our analysis where we knew the offenders were operating and where we knew the communities were feeling fear as well as harm and do something meaningful about it. What we've seen announced in the last week and today is resources that go significantly towards that, and the QPS welcomes that investment from the government. So many of the initiatives are things that we've seen working. So the 2 additional helicopters, for instance, we know from what we've seen in the South East and we know what we've seen on Townsville, that these significantly commit to the organisation to being able to provide the right resources and services into the community. We've seen a reduction in car thefts in Townsville. We know that our officers feel safer when those helicopters are there, so they're very welcome. But it's not just about that sort of capability, it's also about the additional police. And it's also about the additional staff members that we'll have on the ground supporting our police so they can do their jobs better. The more police we have out there, and I'm happy to say that our pipeline is looking very strong, and we have over 600 people in the academy now, and we'll continue to do that, so we'll be pushing more police out. But we need to get them out and working in our community to provide those services that will keep the community safe. So this will all support that. And of course we need better facilities for our police, so the investment in some of the facilities we see as part of this package, and as well as the legislation that goes there, that goes with that. I'm very pleased to see that we're getting legislation that recognises that people that target our emergency workers and our police will be held to account. I need to be responsible for my workforce and supporting them, so this enables us to do that. So these are really significant announcements. We're committed to community safety. The QPS is committed to making our community safer and making it feel safer. And I, as a Commissioner, am committed to making sure that my workforce is supported and that they feel supported. So these things all contribute to that.
Queensland authorities there speaking in Brisbane. We heard from the State Premier Stephen Miles, who is unveiling a new community safety plan, including new laws and law changes to tackle crime. These include expanding a trial of police stop and search powers to shopping centres, licensed premises, sporting and entertainment venues and high-risk retail outlets. The trial, which will now be extended until 2026, gives police powers to randomly search for knives using metal-detecting wands, and an additional 3,000 wands and 1,000 state-of-the-art tasers will also be rolled out. That's the latest from Queensland. We will be returning to Brisbane a little later in the afternoon for an appearance by the Prime Minister. Well, the Prime Minister has expressed sympathy for a 73-year-old Perth woman who was bashed allegedly by a former immigration detainee. The 43-year-old man has been charged over the violent home invasion. He's one of around 150 people released from immigration detention following a High Court ruling on indefinite detention. Political reporter Nicole Hegarty has more from Parliament House.
Well, 73-year-old Nanette Simons was left hospitalised after she was allegedly battered and bashed unconscious, left bloodied and bruised in her home in Perth's north. Her husband, who was 76, was also allegedly abused and tied up during what's been described as a violent home invasion, where a group of people attempted to access the home under the premise that they were police officers. A 43-year-old former immigration detainee, Majid Jamshidi Dukoshkin, is one of several people charged over the violent home invasion and robbery. Those allegations before the court at this stage. Mr. Dukoshkin is, of course, one of the 150 or so former immigration detainees that were released as a consequence of the High Court's landmark decision in November of last year, overturning some decades of precedent that meant that the indefinite detention of immigration detainees, where there was no reasonably foreseeable opportunity for them to be deported, was unlawful.
And what's the political fallout of this, Nicole?
Well, Rose, the main question that's been raised as a consequence of this in terms of the politics side of things is why is it that we are now in April, the end of April, and yet we are yet to see any applications for preventative detention orders. There was this scheme stood up in December of last year. It was rushed through Parliament with support in light of the High Court decision to enable some of this cohort to potentially be detained in a preventative manner, but that has not happened. There haven't been any applications to date. We also haven't heard in regards to this latest, this matter in particular, from the Home Affairs Minister, Claire O'Neill, or the Immigration Minister, Andrew Giles, with Mr Giles referring questions that we put to him to the Australian Border Force. We have, however, heard briefly from the Prime Minister this morning, and here's what he's had to say.
Our thoughts, and I'm sure the thoughts of all Australians, will be with those who've been affected by this. It's inappropriate to comment further, given it's in the middle of the investigation by WA Police.
And the opposition has criticised again the government's response to this matter. They've been critical along the path with the various measures the government has put forward since that High Court decision in November of last year. The opposition leader, Peter Dutton, also speaking today.
He promised them that these people had ankle bracelets, that there was surveillance in place, and that the community would be kept safe. But look at what's happened in WA, and look at what is likely to happen if these people continue on the streets. I don't want to see any Australian harmed. I don't want to see anybody fall victim to a serious criminal offence. But what the government has done here is created a dangerous situation.
Mr Dutton has also criticised the government's lack of transparency here, saying that they've shrouded the incident and their response in secrecy since that High Court decision back in November. Rose?
Nicole, thank you. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is in Alice Springs with Indigenous Australians Minister Linda Burney. It's the first time he's visited the area following recent social unrest and the end of a youth curfew. Reporter Lee Robinson has the details from Alice Springs.
Good afternoon, Ros. Well, the Prime Minister has been touring around a local high school in Alice Springs this morning, meeting with teachers and students and seeing what benefits had come from a significant funding package of $250 million announced the last time Anthony Albanese was in Alice Springs about 15 months ago, and how that program is benefiting the community. He said that while it is still early days, programs like these are showing positive signs, pointing to increased attendance rates among a cohort of students taking part in a program at the school that is being funded out of the $250 million, which was announced off the back of a local crime wave in Alice Springs. And when that announcement was made, the money was set to go towards a range of services and programs that addressed long-standing social issues and disadvantage in Central Australia. Yesterday, the Prime Minister also talked about an additional funding top-up of around $14 million going towards the Northern Territory Police Force, announced by the Attorney General yesterday, and that will bolster numbers on the ground here in Alice Springs. He's also been meeting with stakeholders on the ground both yesterday afternoon and this morning. He said he met with the local town council as well as the Chamber of Commerce, as well as several local business owners. He said the feedback that he's received from them is that these funding activities are making some difference on the ground, particularly in the education sphere. Here's a bit of what he had to say. Take a listen.
There's nowhere that's more important than in a school, because what schools do, they are the foundation of opportunity for our youngest Australians. And here at this wonderful school that has almost 400 students, 398 I'm told, from memory, students here in years 10, 11 and 12, undertaking the full range of education. And one of the things that one of the teachers said to me outside, I said, it must be a rewarding but tough job. And they said, it is a tough job, but it's got less tough, thanks to the funding.
Lee, what sort of reception has the Prime Minister received during this visit?
Well, Ros, this is the first time the Prime Minister has been in town in over 15 months. Of course, the last time he was here, there was Alice Springs was again in the national spotlight. This time, it's come off the back of a youth curfew that recently came to an end, which was announced as a result of a series of violent incidents and rioting in the town. Those on the ground that we spoke to in the streets yesterday questioned how the $250 million funding package was making a difference and where it was being spent, given the situation that Alice Springs has found itself in recent weeks. Now, the Prime Minister, as I mentioned, had been meeting with a number of stakeholders. Not on that list, though, was domestic violence service providers. Here in Central Australia, the rates of domestic and family violence are among the highest in the country. The Prime Minister has said he is looking into ways to address these issues, and tomorrow a cabinet meeting will be held where issues around gender-based violence will be looked at further. Ros.
Lee, thank you. The future budget airline Bonza is in limbo, and the struggling Queensland-based carrier has cancelled all flights. The airline's boss has apologised and has entered into talks on the ongoing viability of the business. Reporter Jessica Ross has more.
Well, we are here at the Sunshine Coast Airport, which is Bonza's headquarters and where the airline had its first ever flight in Australia last January, to much fanfare and excitement. But this morning there's just shock and disbelief, really, among passengers, those who have flown into the coast, those who are trying to fly out as well with the airline. This airline has released a statement this morning, CEO Tim Jordan, saying that they have to temporarily suspend all of their services across the country as discussions are underway regarding the ongoing viability of the business. Now, we understand passengers received text messages informing them that their flights have been cancelled, but many had arrived at the airport already and were just basically arrived to see that their flight had been cancelled on the big screen. We spoke to a few. Here's what they've had to say.
I got up at 4 o'clock in the morning. A friend come down from Sydney Downs to pick me up and come up here, and then the last minute it was cancelled.
I'm a bit frustrated as well because we're like just having a holiday and going back home because we have work tomorrow, so we need to find other way to go back to Rockhampton.
This is actually the first time and it'll be the last time that I'll be flying with Bonza.
As I mentioned earlier, this is Bonza's main headquarters. We were on the other side of the airport before and we were watching as the ground crew brought one of the planes in to park it alongside two of the others, that plane being called Shazza. Of course, the airline has made a name for itself as being a Aussie true blue sort of airline with unique names for its planes and trying to do things a bit differently, shake up the airline industry. But today there's a lot of uncertainty, and particularly among the crew and the staff that work for this company as well. We'll be hearing from the unions, we believe, in a few hours just to see what their reaction to all of this is. But it does employ a lot of people, particularly on the Sunshine Coast, given that this is the headquarters. So we were feeling for the staff today, just wondering what's going on because it doesn't look good.
Egypt is hopeful Hamas will accept Israel's latest offer for a Gaza truce and hostage release deal. Hamas is working on its response to the proposal, which is said to include a 40-day ceasefire in return for the release of hostages taken by the militant group. On his latest trip to the region, beginning in Saudi Arabia, the US Secretary of State said Israel needs to do more to allow aid to enter Gaza. But Antony Blinken says the best way to alleviate the humanitarian crisis is for the two sides to agree to a truce.
Hamas has before it a proposal that is extraordinarily generous on the part of Israel. And in this moment, the only thing standing between the people of Gaza and a ceasefire is Hamas. They have to decide, and they have to decide quickly.
Flash floods and a landslide in central Kenya have killed at least 45 people and injured more than 100. It was initially thought a dam had burst, but authorities say the flooding was caused when a tunnel which channels the river under a railway line became blocked. A large section of track was swept downhill, carrying with it trees, cars and houses. At least 169 people have been killed by flooding in Kenya since the middle of March, and more rainfall is expected. President William Ruto says he'll deploy every resource to help tackle the emergency.
we are having a cabinet meeting to be able to discuss on additional measures that my government is going to take to make sure that citizens who are victims of climate change, who today are suffering floods, they are suffering mudslides, are looked after.
Solomon Islands pro-China leader Manasseh Sogavare has withdrawn from the race to be the next Prime Minister following the country's national election. The controversial politician, who was in his fourth stint as Prime Minister, says he'd been vilified by media and his family had been subjected to unprecedented abuse. It's Dr. Meg Keane from the Lowy Institute with more. Good afternoon, Meg. So tell us more about why Manasseh Sogavare is stepping down.
Well, I think he's stepping down because the election was very clear. There's a mood for change among the voters. He suffered, or his party suffered, very heavy losses in the election. So more than 50% of the sitting members lost their seat. So I think Sogavare realized that if his coalition was to have a chance to maintain power, they needed to change the leadership. There was pressure from the voters and probably pressure from inside his party. So he has chosen someone quite close to him that is likely to continue his political policies and have the best chance at maintaining power. But that, of course, is still uncertain.
So what else can you tell us about the potential replacement?
Well, Jeremiah Manele has been in politics for at least a decade, but he's also a seasoned diplomat. So he has represented the Solomon Islands in the United Nations. So he's going to be quite measured. You're not going to have quite as fiery as a politician as Sogavare has been. He will maintain the look north policy and the close relationship with China, but I think he will be more measured and possibly easier to deal with for Australia and Western countries.
How likely is it that he will take over as leader? Are there any other possible candidates out there?
Absolutely. Well, there's at least one other that has nominated Peter Penaloria. He's the son of the first Prime Minister of Solomon Islands and is popular. But in Solomon Islands, the party system is quite weak. It's very hard to know how people are definitely going to vote when it comes to that vote for Prime Minister, and it is the MPs that vote for Prime Minister. The horse trading, the negotiations are ongoing as we speak, and really it's anybody's game to win until the vote, which is tomorrow at about 11:30 Australian time, 10:30 local time.
Right, so what sort of political horse trading do you think will be going on between now and then?
Well, every MP would like to be a minister, would like to be in government because that's far more lucrative. It pays well. They want benefits for their constituency because in Solomon Islands, politics is local. You have to deliver locally if you want to survive politically. So they're going to be looking for finances, for ministerial appointments, and for a share of the power. And that is what is being negotiated right now.
So with the departure of Manasseh Sogavare, this is really the end of an era, isn't it? Because how long has he been in power?
Well, it's already at the end of an era. Manasseh Sogavare still has his seat in Parliament. I think he will still be a power broker. So he's not going to be running for Prime Minister, but I don't think we've seen probably the last of him. He has been Prime Minister 4 times, and he still maintains the ear of some of the MPs, and he has proven that one can never count him out permanently on the Solomon Islands scene.
Meg Keane, lovely to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Quick look at the national weather now. Brisbane, a possible shower. Sydney, also some rain. Canberra, Melbourne and Hobart, a cloudy day. Adelaide and Darwin, mostly sunny. And in Perth, a shower or two with a possible storm. You can keep up to date at news.abc.net.au and on ABC iView. Here are the top stories on ABC News. The 17-year-old girl has been charged with the murder of her 10-year-old sister. New South Wales police attended a home in Boolaroo in the New South Wales Hunter region, where they found the girl with multiple stab wounds to her upper body. No application for bail was made in the Broadmeadow Children's Court, and the matter is adjourned until June. The number of women killed by a current or former partner has increased by almost 30% in the past financial year. Figures compiled by the Institute of Criminology show 79 deaths, or 34% of all homicides.
Watch French Connections, presented by Florence Villeneuve on France 24 and France24.com.
Mediators express hope after the latest proposal for a truce in Gaza. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has urged Hamas militants to accept what he called Israel's extraordinarily generous offer. Russian strikes kill 4 people in Ukraine's port city of Odessa at a university in a popular seafront park. As more Western weapons are on their way to Ukraine, NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg says Kiev can still win the war. And Gérard Depardieu is to face trial in October on 2 more accusations of sexual assault. It comes 4 years after the French film veteran was charged with rape, facing waves of sexual assault allegations he has denied any wrongdoing. It's 3 a.m. here in Paris. Thanks for joining us back in the France 24 newsroom. First up, Hamas negotiators have left Egypt and returned to Qatar to discuss Israel's latest proposal for a truce in Gaza. The offer includes a 40-day ceasefire in exchange for the release of Israeli hostages and possibly of displaced Palestinians returning to northern Gaza. A Hamas source said they were keen to respond as quickly as possible. The proposal has been met with optimism from world powers, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken among them. He urged the Palestinian militant group to accept the deal, which he described as extraordinarily generous. Iris Mackler tells us more from Jerusalem.
What we're hearing, I'm collating a number of sources here, Palestinian and Israeli, and from Egypt as well. What we're hearing is this. This is what a deal would look like. In Gaza, Hamas would release somewhere around 33 Israeli hostages, and it would not demand a permanent ceasefire at this stage. Israel, in return, would halt its operation, the planned ground operation in Rafah, and would in return would release 1,000 Palestinians held in Israeli jails. They would include about 100 Palestinians, as they put it, with blood on their hands. It's understood there are two obstacles to this at the moment. One is that Hamas is looking at perhaps releasing only 20 instead of 30 plus hostages that it's holding, and it's also insisting that some of those Palestinian prisoners should be from the Nukba brigades. That's the brigades that carried out the October the 7th attacks, and that Israel is resisting that. If all of this goes ahead, there will be a ceasefire, a temporary ceasefire of around a month to 6 weeks.
Here's Mecca, our correspondent in Jerusalem there. Hamas says at least 40 people were killed by Israeli strikes on Monday, more than half of them in Rafah, in southern Gaza. In Gaza City in the north, Israeli planes reportedly hit residential areas, killing at least 6 people. Overnight, an airstrike in the Al-Nusayrat refugee camp in central Gaza killed 3 more, including a local journalist, according to Hamas. Over 34,000 people have been killed in Gaza since Israel launched its retaliatory offensive to Hamas's 7th October attacks. In the US, meanwhile, pro-Palestinian demonstrators at New York's Columbia University have defied a deadline to take down their tents and leave campus. The university began suspending students as hundreds stay put after the 2 p.m. deadline expired. Hundreds have been arrested across several states in the past days as fresh protests sprang up in Texas and Georgia and other states. Students are calling for universities to cut ties with Israel over the war in Gaza. In other world news to Ukraine, at least 4 people have been killed by Russian missiles in the port city of Odessa. The regional governor denounced the strike on a university, which injured over 30 more, several seriously. President Volodymyr Zelensky said Moscow was taking advantage of stalled Western aid. And as more weapons are on their way, NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg said it's still not too late for Ukraine to win the war. Jean-Emile Jamin has the story.
Against the backdrop of the Black Sea, the turrets of this university building in Odessa are slowly eaten away by the flames. This was the site of a Russian missile strike on Monday, the latest deadly attack on Ukraine's port city.
The Russian aggressor once again struck the city of Odessa, hitting the coastal area, resulting in 4 deaths and 28 injuries, including 2 children and a pregnant woman.
Other residential buildings were hit by what Ukraine's navy determined to be an Iskander-M ballistic missile with a cluster warhead. The weapon is considered harder to intercept, often resulting in no prior warning for locals to find shelter.
A missile was shot down right in front of me. My doors were blown open and the glass was shaking. And then I saw this. Just before it happened, we wanted to go for a walk, but thank God we didn't.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky acknowledged the Odessa attacks in his nightly address, adding that without much needed air support, Russia's momentum on the battlefield at large would continue. Urgent calls for military aid were also echoed earlier at a joint meeting by NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg.
NATO allies have not delivered what they promised. The United States spent months not agreeing a package for Ukraine, and European allies have not delivered the amount of ammunition they promised. When we delay supplies, it's about life and death. It has real consequences.
Stoltenberg said, though, it was not too late for Ukraine to win the war, despite the ongoing struggles on the front line.
The Scottish First Minister Humza Yousaf has confirmed he'll step down days before he was due to face 2 votes of no confidence. His decision comes after he ended the Scottish National Party's power-sharing agreement with the Greens, who consequently said they would not back him in the motions of confidence. Charlotte Hughes tells us more.
After just over a year as First Minister and Scottish National Party leader, Humza Yousaf, who was set to face 2 no-confidence votes later this week, has announced he is stepping down.
After spending the weekend reflecting on what is best for my party, for the government and for the country I lead, I've concluded that repairing our relationship across the political divide can only be done with someone else at the helm. I have therefore informed the SNP's National Secretary of my intent to stand down as party leader.
It comes after Yousaf ended the SNP's power-sharing agreement with the Scottish Greens last week, following disagreements over climate change targets. The collapse of the deal sparked 2 no-confidence motions, with the Greens saying they would vote to remove him as First Minister. To win the vote, Yousaf may have had to reach an agreement with Ash Regan, who quit the SNP last year. Regan is now an MSP for the SNP's rival pro-independence Alba Party. She had called for a reassessment of the Scottish Government's policies on gender self-identification in exchange for supporting Yousaf in a no-confidence motion. Support for the SNP is falling after the resignation of former leader Nicola Sturgeon last year, who has since become involved in a party funding scandal but denies wrongdoing. Polling firm YouGov said this month that Labour surpassed the SNP in voting intentions for a Westminster election. It is not clear who is likely to replace Yousaf. John Swinney, a former SNP leader, said he is thinking of standing for the role. If the Scottish Parliament fails to choose a new First Minister within the next 4 weeks, an election will be forced.
Finally, the French film star Gérard Depardieu is to go on trial in October on accusations of sexual assault. The veteran actor was arrested for questioning on Monday and later released. 2 women allege he assaulted them on film sets in 2021. Depardieu was charged with rape in 2020 and has faced a wave of allegations of sexual harassment. He denies any wrongdoing. France 24's Vedika Bahel has the story.
Summoned for questioning, Gérard Depardieu was detained at his police station in Paris. The French actor faces accusations of sexual assault filed by 2 women. One of them, a set designer, says Depardieu groped her on the set of the film The Green Shutters in 2021. Once one of the most sought-after actors in France, Gérard Depardieu has also enjoyed international fame with several roles in Hollywood. But much of his stardom has been overshadowed by his personal life, his self-imposed tax exile in Belgium in 2012, then in Russia, and the numerous accusations of sexual violence. The 75-year-old was indicted in 2020 after actress Charlotte Arnault accused the actor of raping her when she was 22. And she's just one among more than a dozen women who have come forward with accusations, all of which the actor has previously denied. Depardieu's case has exposed a major split in French cinema, which has in recent years been rocked by allegations that it shrugged off sexism and sexual abuse for decades. President Emmanuel Macron sparked an outcry in December when he defended Depardieu as innocent until proven guilty and insinuated he was the victim of a manhunt.
That's it for the moment. Up next, it's the debate with François Picard. The expression went viral in the 1960s.
Togolese voters go to the polls on Monday to vote in the country's parliamentary elections ahead of proposed controversial reforms.
Several people are feared dead in Kenya's east after a boat capsized Sunday, carrying dozens of people.
Togolese voters headed to the polls on Monday to vote in the country's parliamentary elections, which will test support for a proposed new constitution that could scrap future presidential elections and give lawmakers the power to choose the president instead. I hope there is a crucial change, saying what the parliament just did. They changed the constitution. We need to be here to vote.
Every time we have a hope, but this year can be a special hope. For the new generation, a special hope. We want to see opposition in parliament.
The opposition and the clergy say the legislation is an effort by President Faure Yasebe to prolong his rule. Authorities have reportedly cracked down on civic and media freedom ahead of the vote. Now you know the atmosphere in which these elections are happening, a tense atmosphere because of the changes to the constitution in the middle of the electoral process. We have not finished denouncing this for future. Preliminary results are slated for release within 6 days post-election. More than 14,100 polling stations will operate nationwide from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. Observer missions from the AU, among other organizations, have been authorized to monitor the votes.
Volunteers and residents in eastern Kenya searched late Sunday for missing people after a boat capsized. The vessel carried dozens of people after the Tana River, the nation's longest river, burst its banks. The search and rescue was suspended to resume in daylight. Survivors in Garissa County were brought to the Buratana nursing home. Some could not contain their anger at authorities.
Every time, every month, you people are adding levies after levies. Where are you directing those levies to? When you can't help your people. Your people are dying. How many people today were 55? Only 25 of us were able to be reached. Where are the rest at? Why did they die? Because of the negligence from the government. It's not negligence from the people. It is a negligence from the government. So why are you government? If you can't help the people who have taken you to that power, why can't you resign? We have good people who can help these people. What are you doing in offices? Why could people die in such circumstances while you are sitting in your offices taking money?
Kenya has seen weeks of heavy rains, which have killed officially 70 people. The deputy president said Friday that the government set aside 4 billion Kenyan shillings, about $29 million, for emergency relief efforts. The reopening of schools was postponed to May 6th.
Ethiopian Orthodox Christians celebrated Palm Sunday with prayers and a ceremony at the ornate Entoto Miriam Church outside Addis Ababa. This significant day amongst Orthodox Christians marks the beginning of Holy Week and commemorates Jesus Christ's triumphant entry into Jerusalem. An ornately dressed hearse symbolizes Jesus Christ's entry into Jerusalem on a donkey, also took part in the celebration, walking on white garments laid down by children. The Lord said to the messengers, "Bring me the donkey." When the owners of the donkey asked where it was being taken, the messengers replied to them that the Lord needed it, and so he rode the donkey into the city. A scene we reenact here. Worshippers started the annual observance of Palm Sunday before dawn. Worshipper Miret called for peace, health and joy as she took part in the festivities. May our Lord bless this holiday with peace, health and joy, and for the coming year, may it be God's will that we celebrate with happiness and our nation be graced with peace. They prayed for hours, led by priests and deacons.
Tens of thousands of runners took part in the Madrid Marathon on Sunday. Kenyan and Ethiopian athletes were the ones who shone in both the men's and women's races. Ethiopia's Mick Tutafa started chasing a win not long after the start of the 42-kilometer course, extending his lead consistently. However, he faltered in the last 7 kilometers, suffering from heat stroke and hamstring strain in his left thigh. Putting in a final effort, he won the second race of his career. Mick Tutafa was closely followed by fellow Ethiopian Fikre Bekele and Kenyan runner Douglas Chebi, who came in third. Tutafa won the race in 2 hours, 8 minutes and 57 seconds. The 2023 Nairobi City Marathon champion Naum Chebet secured her first international marathon win in Madrid in the women's race. The runner was in the solo lead on the final stretch of her win as well, finishing with a time of 2 hours, 26 minutes and 20 seconds, 44 seconds faster than Ethiopia's Bontu Bekele, who finished second. Fellow Ethiopian Gebere Chala finished in third place.
On this Monday night, cautious optimism in the Middle East. Pressure piles on Hamas and Israel to agree on a truce.
Just end the war.
As pro-Palestinian demonstrations expand on campuses in Canada and the US. Temporarily shut down while retailer London Drugs is still closed, and the consequences for customers needing their medication. After BC backtracks on decriminalizing illicit drugs, what advocates say needs to be done to help addicts. And profiting from peacocks.
This is where they are all the time.
The bird's the word in this Manitoba town.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. There is some renewed hope about a ceasefire proposal between Israel and Hamas. It includes a 40-day truce in return for the release of as many as 33 hostages taken on October 7th and the prospect of displaced families being allowed back to northern Gaza. The U.S. Secretary of State, on his 7th trip to the region, is urging Hamas to swiftly accept it.
Hamas has before it a proposal that is extraordinarily generous on the part of Israel. And in this moment, the only thing standing between the people of Gaza and a ceasefire is Hamas. They have to decide, and they have to decide quickly.
Israel also has yet to accept the proposal, and the pressure, including from families of the hostages, is intensifying. Amnesty International today accused Israel of using U.S.-supplied weapons against Palestinian civilians in violation of international and American law. Amnesty says the incident should be investigated as a potential war crime. As well, the U.S. has found 5 Israeli security force units are responsible for gross violations of human rights, the first time Washington has reached such a conclusion about Israeli forces. All the incidents, the State Department says, happened in the West Bank before October 7th. There are also reports in Israeli media that the International Criminal Court in The Hague might issue arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and other senior officials on suspicion of war crimes in Gaza. Jackson Prosco has our top story tonight.
Israeli airstrikes in Rafah on Monday killed at least 30 and stirred worry about what could come next. We're not asking for much, just the end of the war, nothing more, says this displaced Palestinian woman. Across the Middle East, a frantic diplomatic push is underway to stop the fighting, as regional leaders warn Israel's next planned offensive would be a catastrophic mistake, a ground incursion in Rafah, where 1.2 million Gazans are sheltering.
What we need to see fundamentally is definitely no operation in Rafah, definitely a ceasefire.
At talks in Cairo, Egypt proposed a deal that would see Hamas release up to 33 Israeli hostages in exchange for a pause in the fighting. Egypt's prime minister warned it may be impossible to find common ground.
You will find a lot of pressure internally in both sides not to reach any kind of compromise. And this is what makes it very hard.
That pressure extends to Israel's closest ally, the U.S., where new reports suggest a deep divide within the State Department. Diplomats are said to be split over whether Israel is violating international humanitarian law while using American-supplied weapons.
There are now clearly bureaus and senior officials in the State Department willing to recognize the truth and willing to tell the Secretary what is actually happening on the ground. At the same time, it clearly remains disappointing that the decisions being made by the Secretary are to overrule those officials.
While the Biden administration is calling for an immediate ceasefire, the U.S. is still stopping short of placing conditions on military aid to Israel. As this intractable conflict drags on, those caught in the middle wonder what it will take to end it. Jackson Prosco, Global News, Washington.
Frustration about the Israel-Gaza war continues to seethe on several university and college campuses. Police again confronted protesters at the University of Texas in Austin today. It was chaotic as police tore down barriers and carried people away. And in New York City, students defied Columbia University's deadline to pack up their tent encampment and leave or face suspension. More than 100 tents have been set up on the main lawn at Columbia. Students there are saying they'll stay put until their demands are met, including Columbia withdrawing investment funds from what students describe as companies profiting from Israel's military action in Gaza. Protests are also escalating on some campuses here in Canada. From Vancouver to Ottawa and Montreal, the demonstrations are growing, though nowhere near the scale of the U.S. Mike Armstrong reports on their demands and the reaction.
There is a tension in the air. Rumors rolled through the pro-Palestinian encampment at McGill University, with protesters predicting police could try to shut them down, pressured by the school to move in.
Obviously, we know that is a choice the administration might make, but it would be a disgraceful escalation on that part.
Protesters insist the encampment has been peaceful since the first tents went up Saturday. It's grown since then from about a dozen to more than 75. But peaceful or not, it has been declared illegal by the university. In a statement, McGill says it violates both its policies and the law, and that many of the protesters aren't students.
There's a broader community that is here in support, but this is run by the students.
Sebastian Seva says he's in his 4th year studying neuroscience. He says the encampments started because peaceful calls for institutions to divest from Israel haven't worked. They're instead, he says, now demanding it.
We will be silent. We need this to happen at York, at Queen's, at TMU, at U of T, at Dalhousie.
You'd like to see it grow?
Yes, absolutely. That is the message that we have here.
Well, that call has been heard in some other Canadian cities. Tents are starting to go up at the campus of the University of British Columbia. Organizers are asking for donations of food and supplies. While at the University of Ottawa, a sit-in was held Monday, with students saying the news out of Gaza has been too hard to watch.
I don't want my tuition money going towards that. I feel like it goes against everything I believe in.
While there are calls for the McGill encampment to be dismantled, Montreal MP Anthony Housefather says over the weekend, Jewish students were intimidated and insulted.
We had videos of people calling on students to return to Poland after, Jewish families had been in Montreal for generation after generation. It was disgraceful.
Now, the university says it's trying to de-escalate before it asks police to intervene, but the protest organizers have said they intend to stay on campus indefinitely.
And you have no right to be here.
A representative did try to tell protesters they had to leave. His words were drowned out. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
A number of Canadian MPs say authorities in this country failed to warn them they were likely targets of cyber attacks from the People's Republic of China. The FBI in the United States had the information back in 2021, but as David Aiken explains, politicians who were targeted here in Canada say they only recently found out about it. David.
Well, Donna, the cyber attacks targeted as many as 400 parliamentarians in nearly 40 countries, including Canada. All of them members of an international group of lawmakers with an interest in China. The attacks began in 2021. The FBI detected them in 2022 and determined that a hacking outfit backed by the government of China was behind them. And then, as per protocols that protect each country's sovereignty, the FBI passed on their intelligence to their counterparts in each country, including CSIS here in Canada. But CSIS never told the 18 Canadian MPs and senators who were coming under attack. The Canadians, in fact, just learned of these attacks last week after the original FBI information became part of a court case in the United States. Many of those Canadian MPs are now upset that CSIS did not tell them that they had come under attack from China-sponsored hackers.
The FBI has confirmed that Canadian parliamentarians were targeted with a progressive cyber attack by a foreign government. The FBI informed the Canadian government, and information was not shared with Canadian legislators.
The big question is why. The second question is, well, who is responsible, if any?
But the minister in charge of CSIS, Dominic LeBlanc, was not taking questions. This is not the first time politicians have complained that they've been kept in the dark when it comes to being targeted by foreign governments. In fact, that was one of the central themes of testimony so far at the public inquiry into foreign interference, which by coincidence delivers its first report Friday. Donna.
Okay, David in Ottawa, thanks. A big retail and pharmacy chain in Western Canada, London Drugs, has temporarily shut down all its stores because of what it calls a cybersecurity incident. The company hasn't explained what's gone wrong, but says more than 80 stores will remain closed until further notice. As Heather Yorks West reports, the sudden shutdown is causing big headaches for those who rely on the pharmacies.
The doors were closed for the second straight day at all London Drugs locations as the company grapples with a major cyber attack.
I just came here to renew a prescription, and I just realized that they were closed.
The company, which operates in Western Canada, says it's working with third-party security experts to contain any damages from the attack as they investigate exactly what happened. At this time, we have no reason to believe that customer or employee data has been impacted, it said in a statement.
Pharmacists are standing by to support urgent pharmacy requests.
An inconvenience for shoppers, the sudden shutdown has also been a source of stress for those in need of prescription drugs. Karen Bartko is an online journalist for Global Edmonton.
They said that they had pharmacists standing on by for urgent refills, so when I tried to connect through to talk to a human, it just hung up.
Bartko was later contacted by a store manager and told the branch's phone system had also been knocked down. She was directed to visit the store in person instead.
London Drugs has declined all media requests for interview, saying that the company is working to actively manage this incident. But a recent report from IBM found that on average, companies who fall victim to cyber attacks spend about $7 million and 215 days dealing with the fallout.
There are a lot of signs that are pointing to the ransomware incident, so I'm guessing we're going to learn a little bit more in the coming days.
In a ransomware attack, a company's network or data is held hostage until an amount of money, often in the millions, is paid. Suncor, Sobeys, and Toronto's Sick Kids Hospital have all been recent victims. London Drugs, it seems, the latest to suffer such a fate. Heather Yorks West, Global News, Calgary.
Toronto police say 102 charges have been laid in an alleged identity fraud scheme in Ontario. 12 people are accused of creating more than 680 false identities to apply for and then open bank accounts and credit accounts across the province. They were allegedly used for in-store and online purchases, cash withdrawals, and e-transfers.
To date, this scheme has resulted in confirmed losses of approximately $4 million. Toronto police have executed more than 20 search warrants and 80 production orders to investigate this matter.
Police have also seized several dozen false IDs and electronic templates for creating them, hundreds of debit and credit cards, and about $300,000 in cash. British Columbia has reversed course on a policy that was intended to tackle the overdose crisis. The province is again banning all illicit drug use in public spaces after intense pressure about public safety. More than 2,500 people in BC died from toxic drugs last year, and the province's decriminalization plan was meant to save lives. The retreat highlights the immense challenge governments face balancing public safety and the toxic drug emergency. Neetu Garcha reports.
This is among the daily scenes in Vancouver's downtown east side. BC's NDP government was bombarded with concerns, including public drug consumption and even using and selling illicit drugs in hospital hallways. Now advocates for drug users are warning BC's abrupt change to its landmark pilot project could exacerbate the opioid crisis.
The request of the federal government is essentially recriminalization of possession or use of illicit drugs in public spaces, period.
This means police will soon be able to seize drugs if people are using in public spaces or to arrest them in exceptional circumstances.
I say resolutely that we have to look at this as a healthcare crisis, of looking at all the tools that we need.
Petra Schultz is testifying before the Standing Committee on Health in Ottawa on the eve of the 10-year anniversary of her son's fentanyl overdose death.
Decriminalization is really designed to take police out of the lives of people who use drugs and ensure it's seen as a health issue and treated as a health issue.
To get a job was next. People weren't going to hire me.
Guy Felicella is a harm reduction expert in Vancouver who struggled with addiction for decades, including dozens of drug-related convictions. He says recriminalization will not be successful.
Anybody that I talked to from my past, even policing, judges, they would say that, obviously this didn't change anything for Guy, putting him in prison.
They say the focus should be on prioritizing harm reduction and access to treatment rather than punitive measures which further marginalize those already struggling.
Indigenous people are disproportionately affected by drug poisoning.
As Toronto Public Health awaits Health Canada's review of its application to decriminalize personal drug possession, Ontario Premier Doug Ford says the application should be dropped.
Reinvest into treatment centers, into health, mental health and addiction. That's what we should be doing, not legalizing hard drugs.
BC's move comes after Oregon approved a state law recriminalizing drug possession. The new law makes possession of small drug amounts a misdemeanor, punishable by up to 6 months in jail. Neetu Garcha, Global News, Vancouver.
One family's dream of a better life in Canada shattered. Coming up, a teenager who escaped Syria only to be murdered in Nova Scotia. In Nova Scotia, a family from Syria is grieving the loss of their son. 16-year-old Ahmed Al-Marash was stabbed in Halifax a week ago. 3 teenagers were arrested. All have been charged with second-degree murder. As Heidi Petrachik reports, the boy's family says his murder has shaken their belief of a better life in Canada.
He was peaceful. He was kind-hearted and compassionate.
It's how Basima Al-Jaji wants her son Ahmed to be remembered. She's covering her face because of worries over her safety and the safety of her other children. Last Monday, 16-year-old Ahmed was fatally stabbed in a Halifax shopping mall parkade. 3 teens have been charged with second-degree murder. The Al-Marash family is among the thousands of Syrian war refugees who came to Canada starting in 2016. But life isn't what they imagined. They live in government housing. Ahmed's father is unable to work, waiting for back surgery.
If they don't have the resources or the ability to help and support the Muslim community specifically, it's like they're saying, you can pack your things and go.
Ahmed was one of 7 children. Since his death, his parents have been gripped with grief, fear, anger, and a desire for justice.
I want the person who killed my son to be judged like someone who has full awareness and full cognitive abilities.
Years of lack of support, years of struggling.
This community advocate says the family struggle here is one faced by many refugees coming to Canada.
We as a society have failed in some ways to create that security and sense of community that is greatly needed.
Local mosques are providing extra support. An online fundraising campaign for the family has raised more than $60,000. They are grateful, but there's little comfort.
I came here wanting to protect my children. I left seeking safety, but we didn't find any here.
Now mourning the life he could have lived. Heidi Petrachik, Global News, Halifax. Still ahead, why a member of the British royal family has gone to Ukraine. It's been over 2 years since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Today, for the first time, a member of the British royal family visited the country. Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, met survivors of Russia's attacks along with Ukraine's president and the First Lady. The palace says her trip was to demonstrate solidarity with the women, men, and children affected by the war. Scotland's First Minister Humza Yousaf has resigned just over a year into his term. Yousaf called it quits rather than face a confidence vote. His power-sharing coalition with Scotland's Green Party collapsed last week after Yousaf scrapped climate change targets. His party, the pro-independent Scottish National Party, is losing popular support after 17 years in office, and the upheaval is opening the door to the UK's Labour Party regaining ground in Scotland. French actor Gerard Depardieu has been released from custody after Paris police questioned him over sexual assault allegations. 2 women say the 75-year-old assaulted them on film sets in 2014 and 2021. One says Depardieu groped her on the set of a film called Green Shutters. He hasn't commented, but has denied other allegations of sexual assault. He's been accused by more than a dozen women and faces a rape charge. Flocking to town next, why peacocks are roaming all over this Manitoba community. A small Manitoba community has gone through a bit of an identity crisis lately. Souris is a few hours west of Winnipeg, close to the Saskatchewan border. It used to attract visitors with an old swinging bridge, but a flood in 2011 took it out, along with the town's bird sanctuary. In a twist of fate, a pride of peacocks was set free. And as Melissa Ridgen reports, they have become the toast of the town.
I want to see your peacock, cock, cock, your peacock, cock, your peacock, cock, cock, your peacock.
Souris, Manitoba is most definitely the place to see peacocks. They're quite literally everywhere. Jim Ludlam is where this town's peacock story began a decade ago.
I thought, gee, that would be a great thing for the town of Souris, for tourism. So, my family, we purchased a male and a female and put them in the sanctuary there.
They kept to themselves until the flood in 2011.
With the flood, they had to leave, so they went uptown. And this is where they are all the time now.
No one gave much thought to peacocks on the loose back then. They were more concerned that Canada's longest and oldest cable-stayed footbridge, the heart of the town's identity for more than a century, was lost.
It was pretty traumatic.
The bridge was replaced, but folks worried tourists wouldn't make the 15-minute trek off the Trans-Canada Highway just to visit the new bridge. Turns out, they were right.
The peacocks exceeded the swinging bridge, which is pretty interesting. They draw people to town and make us money. We kind of market the community on it.
Pavo the Peacock here was constructed in 2022 to honor the town's new identity as the place where peacocks roam freely. There's also Peacock Days. As part of that, peacock calling contests.
There's people who love them, and there's people who just hate them. They like to peck the bumpers, and they do a little bit of damage at times.
If peacocks and bridges aren't your jam, there's more.
Did you try the apple fritters?
I bought 2 to go home, and I ate a cinnamon bun.
Melissa Ridgen, Global News, Souris, Manitoba.
That is Global National for this Monday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is this prairie dog having a snack in Saskatoon. Thanks for watching. Jeff Semple will be here tomorrow, and I'll see you again on Wednesday. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching and privilege of your time. This is Amir Shakil 5858. I am Amir Woodman. Have a good life.